Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to be once again on my feet to talk about some of the government's latest legislation. As a refresher from high school civics, this bill is now at third reading. This means it's been introduced in the House, debated, sent to a committee, amended, and is now being debated a final time before we vote on whether to pass it. At every stage of this process, Conservatives have stood up to make this legislation better, to fix many of the glaring flaws in this bill, and to be the voices of the people who sent us here. And at every stage, it's also been made stunningly clear just how much this Liberal government has broken our immigration system after only 10 years in power. Let's take a look at the facts. We know that immigration levels were too high for too many years in this country. We know that senior public servants in Ottawa knew that too. We know that they told the then immigration minister, who was also the housing minister and who is now the Attorney General. We know this Liberal government continued with the unsustainable, out-of-control immigration numbers anyways. They let in over 1 million people in just 1 year. There are many reasons why the Liberals and their bureaucrats would want to continue with high levels of immigration. Maybe to cover up for declining GDP per capita. Maybe for cheap temporary labor. Maybe for other reasons. But this Liberal government didn't pay the price for their bad decision-making. It was people in communities like Cambridge. In the last few years, Cambridge has been growing so quickly that it now really feels like a metropolitan instead of the small town we still see ourselves as. The demand for housing increased so quickly and the prices went up so fast that many people can't afford a home in the neighborhoods where they grew up. Our schools are bursting at the seams, and good luck trying to find a family doctor or get into the ER if you need it. Crime in our community is also rising. We know repeat violent offenders are often the culprits, but multinational gangs and criminals are also to blame. This Liberal government literally allowed somebody who appeared in an ISIS video to come to this country. The new immigration minister herself still can't say if the current process is sufficient or describe any of the steps in the process whatsoever. Those violent terrorists are in addition to the gangsters and the gun runners that have been taking advantage of our lax laws and security for years. People like Arjan Sanan, just 19 years old, who came here, committed drive-by shootings and extortion, got arrested, but hopped on a plane and fled to India for 2 years, till he felt brave enough to come back to Canada last month and was luckily arrested. That's why it was so infuriating to see Liberals propose Bill C-3 in its original form, because it was simply a rehashing of the same failed Liberal policies that got us here in the first place. It would have allowed unlimited chain migration to Canada in amounts that our own government couldn't even properly estimate. It would have let people in with no security screening and without having to demonstrate proper language skills. Almost no substantial connection to Canada would have been required. This is the wrong way to go about fixing our immigration system. It's like leaving the front door of your house wide open and just trusting anybody who walks in to sit down in your living room and watch TV. It just doesn't work like that, and Canadians know better. But this bill, in its new form, could go much further, and that's thanks to the advocacy and the hard work of Conservative MPs here in Ottawa. There are amendments on the table to now include residency requirements, meaning if you want to be a citizen, you should demonstrate a substantial connection to Canada. That's common sense. There are also amendments to include language requirements, meaning you should be able to fluently speak English or French to become a citizen here. There's also a citizenship test, because everybody who becomes a Canadian should know about our country and its history. These amendments include mandated security screening so we can make sure that everybody who gets citizenship is somebody that we can trust. And finally, there are requirements mandating that the minister reports to Parliament each year about the number of people who get Canadian citizenship. These are the kinds of things that people expect from our immigration system. It should meet our needs. It should keep us safe and should make sure we preserve the value and the honor of citizenship. I think that's the main point of distinction here. The Liberal government, frankly, has degraded the value of Canadian citizenship. They've made it easier for people who have committed crimes to stay here in Canada instead of deporting them. They abandoned all sense of restraint or reasonable immigration level targets. They even wanted to let people take their oath of citizenship, a solemn and dignified honor, online. They literally wanted to allow people to get their citizenship with a click of a button. Conservatives, on the other hand, want to protect the honor in citizenship and make our system stronger. That's why we put forward these amendments. That's why we worked with advocates and stakeholders to make the bill stronger. You know, Mr. Speaker, I'm noticing a trend in this place. Last week I was up to speak on a similar bill, C-12. And on that piece of legislation, too, it was Conservatives who stood up to make a bad law better. That's exactly what we've done here with C-3, and it's what we're going to do day in and day out with other proposals, too. I'm really proud when I can go back to Cambridge every weekend and point to accomplishments like this as proof that our Conservative team is united, strong, and working hard for the people that we serve. If it wasn't for us working with other parties and stakeholders, a bad bill wouldn't have just been proposed, it also would have become law by now. I call on all members of this House to support these amendments. If it isn't common sense to perform security screenings, if it isn't common sense to have a citizenship test, and if it isn't common sense to make sure that the people we welcome here have a substantial connection to Canada, then I really don't know what it would be. The Liberals haven't even fixed the mess they made of the immigration system over the last 10 years, and they already want to expand it. The Liberals' own minister said they can't account for all the people they have lost here in Canada that should not be here. With this many people currently undocumented and lost in Canada, it puts everyone in danger, especially those vulnerable to becoming victims of human trafficking and exploitation. This is a widespread modern-day slavery crisis happening right here in Canada. It is also well known that just last year, the UN put out a report which referred to Canada's temporary foreign worker program as a breeding ground for contemporary forms of slavery. The report came out last year and is titled Visit to Canada. It's only 22 pages long, and I highly recommend all Canadians, but especially my colleagues across the aisle, read it to properly understand the Liberals' failures that must be addressed before opening up Canada to even more exploitation. This cheap, inhumane labour that the Liberals refuse to address is also further pricing young Canadians out of their future here in Canada. With the dream of home ownership already taken away by the Liberal housing crisis, and so much of our youth struggling to put food on the table and living paycheck to paycheck, the Liberals are now having their jobs taken away. With the labour market becoming oversaturated, youth unemployment reached 15% in September, according to Statistics Canada. What future is this government leaving for the next generation when they can't find jobs, afford food, or look for a place to live? If the Liberals can't even offer a future to current Canadians, what is left to offer new Canadians? Instead of trying to address the problems this Liberal government has made, they are already moving on to find new ways to expand the problems with bills like C-3. Mr. Speaker, I'll close by saying this. Canada is a proud country, and we are all proud to be Canadians. This place was built by people who came here from places all around the world to contribute their talents and achieve their dreams. If we didn't have immigration, then we wouldn't have a country, plain and simple. It's up to us now to make sure that this system and this immigration structure works for everyone. That's what we want to do here in Ottawa, and that's what we'll always keep fighting for in Parliament Hill.
Questions and comments. Question et commentaire. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Don Chapman had sent me an email, and he's fairly well recognized as someone that really understands and has an appreciation for the lost Canadians. And in it, he has it stating that there was a 1997 Supreme Court decision, Benner versus the Secretary of State, which declared background checks for lost Canadians to be unconstitutional. There's also a report, Mr. Speaker, that came out back in December 2007 when Stephen Harper was the Prime Minister and the Conservatives were in power that reinforced that Supreme Court statement. The Conservatives have changed their position on that in regards to individuals as a birthright being entitled to the citizenship. I'm wondering if she can explain why they've changed their position.
The Honourable Member for Cambridge.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberal across the way here is just reflected from their soft and crime approach. And this is consistent with these Liberals. But, Mr. Speaker, if the Liberal government wanted to actually clean up the mess they made of the immigration system, they would focus on legislation to do that and not force through C3, which expands the loopholes and exploitation it faces. Liberals are mocking Canadians by lowering citizenship requirements to something they would obtain at a drive-through window.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. L'honorable.
The Honourable Member for La Pointe-à-L'Île. Thank you very much. Basically, what happens is that if we accept the amendments to the amendments at committee made by the Liberals and the NDP, someone could have lived in Canada for 3 years out of 65 years, for example, and then their children, who would never have lived in Canada, would ask for and automatically receive citizenship by descent without any security checks, without sovereignty or language tests. So why does my colleague think that the Liberals want to accept citizenship by descent without any conditions, without being rigorous at all?
The honourable member for Cambridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for his question. All I can say is there just doesn't seem to be any common sense. The Liberals are, I'm trying to understand the logic or lack thereof, and it's a tough question to answer. I don't see any logical reason for wanting to push through a bill so open to its errors, failures, exploitation, without addressing any of the problems their past attempts have created. With the Liberals' immigration track record of these failures, I highlighted in my speech, plus all the speeches of my colleagues pointing out different issues with it, I wish they would try to fix their current mess instead of trying to make it even bigger.
Questions and comments? The member for Edmonton West.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague from Cambridge for a very well thought out speech today. Now, we've seen repeatedly over the years the Liberals have debased and destroyed our consensus, the Canadian consensus on the success of immigration and its value to this country. I'd like to ask my colleague to opine on whether she believes devaluing citizenship, as the Liberals are doing in C3, will help restore Canadians' faith in this government and in our immigration process.
Member for Cambridge.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleague for his question. It's definitely a huge concern. First of all, citizenship and Canadian identity is the heart and soul of what makes this country so good. And I'm very honored to be a proud Canadian citizen. It's a privilege that every family must earn, whether it be your ancestors building this country, fighting to defend it, or by just following the rules and requirements set out for new Canadians to share in this honor. Citizenship should not become as easy to get as your late-night impulse purchases on Amazon.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. L'honorable.
The Honourable Member for... Honourable Member. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Your table has just regrouped all of the NDP and Liberal amendments in just one vote. Only one vote in this House, and the House will decide if all the work done at committee on this bill will be erased or not. What respect does the government have with respect to the work of this committee?
Member for Cambridge in about 25 seconds or less.
Mr. Speaker, there just doesn't seem to be no respect at all. Like I said, there's a lot of inconsistencies with this bill, and if the Liberal government wanted to actually clean up the mess they made of the immigration system, they would focus on the legislation to do that. The bill, it's an overreaching bill that is open to so much exploitation, and the government has failed to address all of it that's happening in our immigration system due to all these Liberal failures.